Hey, everybody, it's Mark Pattison. I'm back again with another great episode of Finding Your Summit, all about people overcoming adversity and finding their way. And before we get to this week's great guest, I just want to tee up my website once again, www.markpattisonnfl.com. And there you can find over 250 different podcasts that I've done of really inspirational people doing amazing things. I would always appreciate the love of going to Apple and giving a ratings and review. It makes a big difference in the popularity of the show and becoming more visible within the Apple world. So that's number one. Number two is continuing to raise money for Amelia Everest through Higher Ground. It's a great organization all about empowerment. You can see the hat right now. Higher Ground here in Sun Valley, New York, and Los Angeles. And we've raised quite a bit of money to date, and we continue to try to help people in many different ways. And finally, I've been talking about this film, Searching for the Summit. I've been talking about the film being Emmy nominated. We are official Emmy winners now. So it's a big win. It was amazing. We're going to talk about it. You can see the film through my website. Just go find the red buttons and we'll take you right there. So let's get to my amazing guest this week. He is the one, the only Ryan Travis. Ryan, how you doing?
Good, man. How you doing? Great to see you again. What has it been? Almost a week now, a week and a half since we were in New York. For Emmys. Still, still sinking in. I mean, I've had the luck of having a couple good projects and winning a couple of these before, but it just takes a while to sink in of what that means for the project and, all the love and passion that we put into it. And it's just so excited to get that acknowledgement from very accomplished peers. So.
Yeah, no, it's insane. And so I want to set this up for the audience. So what's your role in this whole thing? You're the director, you're the producer. When I got a call in January of 2021. And now, again, as we all remember, I was trying to go to Mount Everest in 2020. Then COVID hit, the whole world shut down. That fast forwarded everything into 2021. And at that point in time, out of the blue, I get a call from the NFL. And next thing I know, we've got a team, yourself and Dakota, to people from NFL 360 descending into Sun Valley. I think it was maybe last February. And, it's just like we jumped in this thing. I think from your standpoint, we didn't really know what, or maybe you didn't really know what you were going to get into. It was just about, at the time on the surface, about some little jock that was going to climb a bunch of mountains with Mount Everest right in the front view mirror. And for you guys, slowly unraveling and peeling, and then all these different pieces coming together. And it started to be off like when we talk about short documentaries, we're talking about 5 to 7 minutes. I think that's where kind of the intent was. But the more you guys pulled back the onion, the more that there is so much that you guys, like, there's no way you're going to be able to capture this epic moment on Mount Everest and everything that led up to it. And then there on the mountain, and then afterwards in 5 to 7 minutes.
Yeah.
So from your perspective, like, what was that journey? I'm not looking for things that I already know, but I'm really looking back on, like, hey, Ron, you get the call from one of the guys, from Dallas, one of your colleagues, or from Trent, one of your colleagues, or Mike, same deal. Hey, on this project, we want you to go to Sun Valley and film this dude that's about to go climb Mount Everest. I mean, what was going through your mind?
Yeah, I mean, on the show, we kind of always talk about ideas and projects, and this was one that both Mike and Dallas had mentioned to me. And the first thing you hear when you hear Mount Everest is super intriguing, Nepal, the whole thing. And so as soon as you just hear that, my mind started sort of running like, oh, there's a lot of potential here. This is super interesting. And so from the get-go, it was something I was interested in. I mean, I've always kind of been interested in Mount Everest and mountaineering. So that was, like, I think, a good thing for the project and a reason why I was so interested to start with. I think it was like right after the Super Bowl, we kind of got pitched this idea. And as you mentioned, like, for our show, a project can be anywhere from 5 minutes to, in our case, a half hour, which is just definitely on the longer end, for us. But as soon as I heard initially what was happening, and also that we were going to be able to film parts of you actually doing it, I knew there was potential for it to be bigger, for it to be a much more involved film. Because a lot of the show is mainly kind of looking back at stuff that's already happened, right? If you look at the other episodes, it's mainly like, okay, we're going to go talk to a couple players and maybe there's something coming up. But the main thing we're talking about is stuff that's happened in the past. And so it's harder to make something like that sustain for a long time. And they do. I mean, lots of documentaries do that all the time. It's definitely a format. But those are the two things that excited me about the project. And so, and I kind of had known your story a little bit, which was intriguing, as far as what you did after football and sort of finding this purpose and finding a purpose in Nepal and Mount Everest. You just start thinking about things like, what does that mean? Where are you going to go? And I just felt like there's so many opportunities. So we just got a small team together and headed to Sun Valley and just dove right into it, and just to see what you were about, to see what your training was about. And some of these other characters that you work with, like Jim Mora, who was so amazing in the film and such a great training partner for you. I feel like he was another huge part that made the film. It just gave it a little more breath to it, because instead of you just sort of talking about what you're doing, you've got this buddy who's with you, who's like also worried about you. And it just gave it this interesting sort of, not buddy guy film, but in a sense, a little bit, you had a guy going with you on the journey a little bit there. And I thought that was super interesting. And then, we got into some of the other people in Sun Valley, like Ed Easters, who's, one of the most famous American mountaineers, and just, he's so interesting. And so again, you look at the film, like he's not in it much. I mean, we could definitely do a longer version, but so after we did that, and after we shot all this great footage of you training and got really, into your story, which we've talked about a little bit, that initial interview, we really got your whole story. And so at that point, it was easier to kind of think about, well, what is the film really about, right? And I think any film, you need to have your why somebody's doing it, and sort of getting that to that early on, I think was helpful for us, even though we didn't know the necessarily path of how we were going to get there narratively. But it gave me an interesting creative idea to split up the narrative, right? I'd seen a film, a limited series on Netflix called Louis Miguel, which is a really cool film if you guys haven't seen it. It's like 10 episodes or something, but it's subtitles, but it's about a famous Mexican singer. And it does, it's basically a biopic on his whole life. And it does similar to what we did in the film, right? You're following him in present day, going down a track, and then it jumps back just randomly to other times in his life to sort of tell that biopic. And I felt like, well, this is a perfect way that they did it. I really was inspired by it. And so I was like, well, maybe that's something we can do here, because we're with Mark as he's actively heading to Mount Everest, right? So that's a narrative storyline that we can start with you and move to an end, however that ends, right? So we can, as an audience, we can be on that journey from start to finish. And then in between that, we can now jump back to find the separate narrative structure of your why, right? Which is very in depth, I think, in a lot of different reasons. And I think, it resonated with a lot of people. You've got obviously your daughters who you're trying to raise money for, you've got Mount Everest, you've got, the struggles you've had in your life, and you're so open about those. And I think those things really made you feel like a real person, and it made the audience, I think, connect in a way like, oh, well, we've all kind of gone through things like that, I think it was, in the end, I think those two things, by the time you get to Mount Everest, right, we're rooting for you. We know your why. We're like, oh man, like what's going to happen? And I think that was, once we started editing that was kind of the goal.
So let me ask you this: had you guys thought about? I'm just throwing this out as a curveball, but
yeah,
like if you, like, let's just say, I mean, I was on the edge of not coming back home, right? Of finding myself back up there. And if that would have been the outcome, how would you have proceeded forward with the film, or would you guys just canned it? I mean, what had you guys talked about that?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. Somebody had asked that question at another Q&A, and I don't know the answer. I don't know. I think obviously that story still needed to be told, no matter where it sort of ended up. But I don't know really. I don't know the answer. I mean, it's a very great question. I think it just comes into what happened and how it happened, and what you can do to sort of still get your story out there. But to your point, I mean, yeah, we didn't know what was going to happen. We didn't know if you're going to make it up to the top, or like you said, a lot of people on the trip didn't make it to the summit. They still made it back, but they didn't make their goal. So it's like, what does that mean for the film? And so I think, in just answering that question a little more specifically, like you mentioned you didn't make the second peak, which is Lhotse, which initially, you were texting me, which was like, oh, my eye was hurt, I made it. And so we didn't really know exactly what was happening, but super excited that you got to the summit. But then after we had done the last interview and stuff, it's like, well, what do we do with that? Is that something we leave out of the story? Like, do we fully get into that? And it was when we sort of realized that was one of the biggest turning points in the film, right? For you, I think, is that having that near death experience and not making sort of the second peak, you had a realization and sort of a transformation, in my opinion, at least when we interviewed you right after, saying that, now the goals and stuff aren't as important. It's really the people you love. And I thought that was probably one of the strongest points in the film, and that was something that we didn't control, and something that happened that we didn't expect to happen, but we were able to identify it. And I think it's really a special moment in the film. And then to get to your point earlier about like timing, like, yeah, it's interesting. Like, so these projects, like, we're always like, oh, it could be this, it could be longer. And there's actually no real limit to it. It's like, if it's a great story, it can be long. If it's, if you as a director can make it Emmy winning and amazing, yeah, of course you can have 30 minutes in the show. But it always starts much smaller. Like you said, it's like, oh, we're going to do, maybe a 6-minute thing. We'll get Marcus training and stuff. And so I think once I saw what we could capture, just in that small window that we were in Sun Valley, from a visual perspective and from a story perspective, I knew I wanted to make it a longer piece. So, and it slowly got longer, and that, I think that was more of, trying to get that through with the people here, and slowly like teasing them, like, oh, we're now at 15. Now we're at 22, now we're at 29. And so that's always a fun kind of, game that we do here. But I know, like, Stephanie and I, my editor, always talked about, hey, there's no limit. This can be a 30-minute doc, and it probably should,
Yeah, I still think I still think it could be an hour. I guess there's a lot.
I agree. There's so much stuff we didn't use. I feel like it could have been a full hour, and we were, for us, 30 minutes was the most we could do for the broadcast show. And so for us to go more than that kind of doesn't make sense. But I agree with you. I mean, it's there's more there. And as we struggled with not being able to go to Nepal, which was so tough, and we were so close.
Let's talk about that for a minute. So what because I think this really played into a lot of things, and a lot of what people don't know. I mean, if you haven't seen the movie, again, Searching for the Summit, you can see it through my website. By the way, I'll have to figure out when this episode's going to run, but we are showing it here in Sun Valley on June 16th, 2022 at the Opera House. So if you're in town, come over and see it. But it's never a good idea, especially from a professional organization like NFL 360, to all of a sudden give an amateur a camera who has no idea what they're doing. And so what you guys did was equip me with some different GoPros at the time, and it was in flux on whether or not you guys could come over there at the time when we were doing kind of the final shooting and editing. And I met you guys in LA because COVID was wreaking havoc on the planet once again. And so I believe it was NFL security or something that shut down your ability. I mean, your tickets were bought, they were in hand, you were coming up there, you had a plan with Garrett or expedition leader.
Yeah. No, I mean, we were literally packed. Like, we had bought new gear, everything was ready, like literally packed to go. And NFL security was like, you can't, the COVID is so bad in India. It was when the Indian variant, I forget what it was called at that point, but had gotten so bad. They're like, we're shutting this down, which, like, we were at that point, we didn't care. We just wanted to be to go document it. I mean, we were so invested at that point. It's just like, it was such a letdown. And then once you get past that, it's like a scramble to what are we going to do? And luckily Garrett and his team and you were just so helpful in getting other people over there that had some real cameras that could really, get what we couldn't as best they could. Right. But then beyond that, before all of that, even if we were going to go, we wanted to teach you how to capture your point of view anyways, because that's super intriguing. And we wanted to have the big scope from these other cameras, but also to have, your perspective, like, let's get on the mountain with you. And, we're not going to the summit, we would have been on the smaller, lower portions of the mountain. So getting a camera and your point of view, up at the summit was super important. So yeah, as Mark mentioned, we had gotten a couple GoPros and a couple other cameras we kind of, worked with you on. And, you did a great job practicing and training, and we made it as simple as possible. Like, hey, it's just pressing a button and sort of dealing with batteries and just giving you as much as we could to kind of make it easy. But to your point, we were relying on you to get that point of view, and you did an amazing job. I mean,
well, I did an okay job. I mean, look, at the end of the day, it's a lot different talking about any of these types of things in the coffee shop at sea level or, in some valley,
for sure.
We're up a little higher, but then when you're at the top of the world, holding on for your life. And the last thing you care about is pushing a button or changing out a battery, and your hands are cold. And it's, so all those things come into play. So now let's fast forward the clock. Cause now we about a month ago, and I don't even know how these processes work, but about a month ago, we were given a heads up that our film, Searching for the Summit, of which you produced, along with the other wonderful, really talented people at NFL 360, we were nominated in 2 categories: one for Best Picture, short documentary, and number 2 for Best Cinematography, which I was really proud of because I had, some role and all that, right?
Yeah.
And so, at the time, I really honestly felt like, and I'm interested in your point of view. I felt like, because this is what you do. This isn't what I do. It was such an honor just to be, you hear this all the time at the Academy Awards or something. It's such an honor just to be included, right? And it was. And that was. And then I had to have another guy that was in the film, Hugh Millen. I was down in Phoenix, Arizona. I was like, God, I'm really on the fence with this. Well, should I go back to New York or should I not? And what do you think? How should I play this? And then he was giving me all his analytical, like, well, look, if you don't regret this and you win, it'd be the biggest regret of your life. And if you go and you don't win, then, you get to be amongst all this greatness in the room, which we were: TNT, ABC, ESPN, Fox, all the big players were there. And everything he kind of said actually came true. And then we're in this magical moment. I met you at the hotel earlier, and as a group, we all walked over to the Lincoln Center. And then, but what were you going through? Because this has happened to you before. And I'm interested also at what other categories, maybe it's the same category, maybe it's the Best Picture, but what other categories have you personally won and been a part of these other films that you've done?
Yeah, so we've won Best Short Feature, which is the shorter category. So it's like a 6-minute and under documentary type piece, which that was a couple years ago now. Then we also won Long Feature, which is around 15 minutes. And the other one we won was for it's called Transmedia, which was a very cool project we did called NFL 100, which was basically 5 hours of TV going back over the last 100 years of the NFL. And so it was a co-production with NFL Films, and we spent a whole year doing it. It was like 500 interviews of all these celebrities. And so that was like much more of a team effort. There's so much content, but I was, one of the key people in that as well. But I think for our project, like, short documentary.
So just so I'm clear, when you say long feature. What's the difference between a long feature and what we did, which we won, our 30-minute film for short documentary?
Yeah, so that's like limited at like I think 15 minutes.
Yeah.
So it's just a shorter form of storytelling. It's a similar documentary type thing, but a lot of times it's not in the same category as a documentary because we have so many other things going on, right? We have the active storytelling. We're sort of with you on this journey, and it's a much longer piece. And so, as you get into the longer categories, those are more prestigious awards. I mean, those are hard. They're just harder to get because there's so many out there. There's so many amazing, good documentaries. Like you said, Netflix, Amazon, HBO, ESPN. All of those guys are submitting all their best things. And most of those guys are focusing on just documentaries, long and short. And so, just to be nominated with everybody is such a huge accomplishment just because there's so much great material out there in that category, and then to win is just it's really special. And for me personally, like I put so much personally into this project, more so I think than some of the others, that it's just really special to have that acknowledged. But it's like I was on this with you for almost a year by the time is said and done, and so it just meant a lot to me. Yeah. The project as a whole.
So do you get, maybe it's the same, I don't know.
Yeah.
It might be asking somebody who is an Olympic track star, do you get more gratification out of winning the gold at the 100 meters, or do you get more gratification out of winning, the 1500 meter, some crazy 10,000, right? Just because it's longer and it's harder, kind of your analogy.
Yeah.
So I'm just trying to, like, at the end of the day, is a win a win, or do you, in your mind, do you separate these wins?
I mean, look, any type of acknowledgement is just amazing. But yeah, I mean, for me, this one I would say is probably, I'd say the first one and then this one are probably the two most special in my mind, as a filmmaker, for sure.
Yeah. So, I would go back and ask you sort of the same questions that I had when you first originally came over and you talked to Ed Viesturs, Jim Mora, Hugh Millen, Garrett Madison. I'm trying to think, seems like my daughters, there was two more. So, there's all these, there's like 7 people that were involved in talking in this. And are there any surprises that you thought when you first came? And again, I'm taking you back to square one, kind of where we started this conversation, that you came away like I thought it was going to go this way, and it swung over here because of one of the 7 people that you talked to just gave more depth or gave a different perspective, or you learned something different that you didn't know?
I mean, nothing too crazy, because we do a lot of research before we get into anything, so I kind of knew. I mean, I known Ed and a lot of the other guys. It's kind of, you do a little research before you do the questions, so you kind of know what you're getting into, right?
Yeah.
But I think the main one is we did get so much information from you, from your personal struggles. I think, and it's easy to like say, oh, I struggled with this or that, but then to hear someone talk about it and to get into the detail of it, you never know how that's going to go. It could just be like, you could just say, oh, it was tough, and that's your answer, and that's all you get. And so then now that's much harder to make that a key point in the film, right? Because there's no emotion, there's no detail. So we knew those are kind of things that were important, but I think getting those answers from you really made us understand a little bit, like I said, of your why. And so, when we go back at the end, we talk to your daughters again, and we talk to you at the end, and those things become bigger parts in the film that, they may have if you had given a different answer, or if it hadn't gone so deep into those questions with you personally. And then Jim was a great, like I said before, like, he could have been like a one single bite in there, but he became such an interesting character, I think, because he was so great leading up to what you guys are doing together, and just his outlook of what you were doing and why, I think, was super interesting too. So I think those two things probably, were more than we expected, for sure. And then just getting, with Cooper, who's amazing drone op there, and just getting all the amazing images we got from Sun Valley and all the great training that you guys did. I mean, you guys were so great and being willing to film with us and spending all the time. And as you see on screen, it shows, I mean, that stuff, that's why it was nominated for cinematography for that and for the Everest stuff. But like, you look at those images and those are really great. And they really do emphasize, your story and your why. I mean, I think one of my favorite scenes is we shot, you sort of camping up at night, in Sun Valley here, where it's like kind of moody and dark, and we colored it very, very blue. And it's, so you have these beautiful images and you alone, and you have that big drone shot behind you. Right. So that alone is a very beautiful scene, but then you put that against your personal struggle of being completely alone. Now, all of a sudden there's a huge meaning behind the visuals. And so now it becomes probably one of the strongest points in the film. You're like, you're literally talking about, whether you're going to continue your life or not, and you're completely alone. And I think when an audience sees that, like all of a sudden that clicks, like now so I think, that was something I think was super powerful in the film, and something, again, we kind of discovered when we were there. And I think it played out very well in the film.
So one of the questions I keep asking, for me is what's next? What's next? What's next? And just because my Seven Summit journey has on paper at least come to an end, a lot of people are just assuming that that's it for me. And what I keep saying is it's not the end, it's really the beginning. And to me, there's this great line in this movie called, I think it was called The Ride. And it was a surf, Jake Burton. And this is a guy that really got after life and did all these amazing things. He was really the creator, the inventor of the snowboard. And so it kind of documents his life. And now he gets to 60 years old and he's just going gangbusters, snowboarding, going here, going there, creating new things, new apparel, new verticals, all this stuff. And people are like, God, you turned 60, man, it's time to slow down. And he goes, well, maybe it's time for you to speed up. And it's just such a great line. And I really took a lot, to heart, when he said that. And that's kind of the way I feel. I feel like, what this whole journey of Tommy is really about letting loose and stepping into things I've never done and attack with full gusto. And now we're going off to the Matterhorn and Mont Blanc. And, maybe or maybe not, you guys are going to come over with me. But, it's just whether, and I've said this from day one to many people, because with the exception of Jim on some mountains, whether you're with me or not, I'm still going, because in all these mountains I've gone, I've landed not knowing a person, and it's scary. And you go to these new destinations in these foreign lands, and many times people not talking your language, and you got to figure it out. And yet you come away at the end of it, a better person and more knowledgeable. And like, what, I just did that. And it doesn't always work out exactly how you want to, but as I said, every once in a while you step into the fear and magic happens. And what people don't know, in this Lincoln Center that we were sitting in, you and the rest of the NFL 360, where there were all these like blocks of organizations, of media companies, the ESPN was here, and TNT was there, and HBO was over there, and then sprinkled in with all these different major personalities, Bob Costas, and there's a big tribute with Leslie Visser and all these other people, all these Mike Tirico sitting right in front of me, but I somehow or another, my seat was, like the second row from the stage, kind of like boxed in this little corner. And my heart was absolutely pounding when our category, and I just didn't think it was going to play that way. I didn't think, the way the night was kind of going and some of the film choices that were being made, it just seemed like, especially ESPN, they had 3 really well done Black History Month films, 3 in every category at 6. And so, they have 3 films in one category, and it's just us and a couple other films. And I didn't think there was a way. And when they announced the name, I think Tirico was the one who announced it and said, oh my God, NFL 360 is on a roll. My heart just absolutely sank. And it was crazy. So, at the end of the day, you and I, you had this great talk. It was spontaneous, I know. And the 3 of us were flanked, behind you. I was holding the Emmy, and, it was just a magical, incredible, like surreal. I'm still asking myself, did that really happen? I have to actually go watch the video to
Yeah.
see
Yeah.
that actually happened.
No, it's so true. I mean, and it's like, you just never know. And your heart's racing and you're like, oh man, I hope we have a chance. I know we have a chance. And then you hear the first part of the name and you're like, oh my gosh, we won. And then you just make your way up there. And, I had, written down a bunch of other things to say, which I totally forgot. And, you get up there and you're like, oh my gosh, like you look out at the crowd, you get the award. And it was amazing to get it from Mike Tirico, who's, such an amazing, on-screen personality. And it's just, it's real at that point. You're up there holding it. And luckily you guys were up there with me, which was amazing. And got to share that with you and say a few words and just try to take it in. And then you walk off stage and you're like, oh my gosh, we actually did it, and then you go take a bunch of pictures and it's still sinking in for me too. I mean, it was just so amazing to be recognized and especially for this project. And, it's just like, it's still to today, so anyways, yeah, what an experience.
So
and I think
for us,
it's like,
go ahead.
we spent such a long time in the film, it's a year in the making. And we had done a couple screenings, which, those always go well and you get positive feedback and it's always great to do those. But
yeah, but when you get it from your peers and they were obviously moved, and that's, I think, one of the things about the film that people haven't seen it, and I think you said it in certain ways, but I think whenever you get like a Rocky movie, for example, which is a great example, it's not about this guy that was boxing who actually lost. A lot of people forget that he lost in the opening Rocky movie, but it's about all these emotional adversity issues and roadblocks that he had to go after, Rocky Balboa had to go through and over and everything else. And I think if you look at this movie, it's really not about, again, me, this old jock climbing, this crazy mountain. It's about all the other stuff that at the end of the day really matter in life. And I think that you guys were able to do a sensational job of really pulling out the emotional heartstring of what that was between your music, the cinematography, the people talking, the actions, the interactions, all those things happening, that at the end of the, I mean, I just like, I'm not an actor and I'm not in this business. And so for me, it was just a really cool thing, but this is what you do. This is what you're really good at.
Yeah.
It just validates your work. And, it just, I don't know. It's just like, you guys have a gift and I feel so incredibly blessed that I was given the call and you guys wanted to actually document this thing. And, we're all at the very end sitting there high-fiving that this is unreal, yet sometimes magic does actually happen.
Yeah, no. And I think to your point, it's, it was the right team of people. It just seemed like the right project. And, we had an amazing team, amazing editor, Stephanie Yang, Dakota, my fellow cinematographer, is awesome. The team in Sun Valley was amazing. Even our teams up in Seattle and LA doing, those interviews, and the drone work, and obviously the Everest crew was so good. You mentioned the music. We had a great sound mixer, and he also did some original scores, for free on the film because he just loved the film so much. And it's like, who does that, and he's a guy we work with all the time. And he was just so drawn to the film. He's like, oh, I want to make it, and he would send songs over. We're like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. And give a couple notes, he'd tweak it. And so I think the score is a mix of, library music and original score, which, for this type of budget range, it's hard to be able to do that. But I think the music makes all the difference in the world. It's not too much, but it's enough to get you emotional. And those are just so important in filmmaking. And there's so many choices to make along the way. And I think that's part of the fun of it, I guess.
Well, it's fun when you win and it sucks when you lose. And you won. So that's
exactly
the fun of it. So that's the way that goes. So, okay. Well, listen, buddy, I totally appreciate you coming on the pod. We talked about this last week after we had our big win. It was just like, what? I need to have you on this. I've done 250 of these things. I've always talked to fascinating people, but we did something incredible together. But at the end of the day, I guess I played a big role in this set, but you guys are the ones through your genius and creativity, put this masterpiece together. And at the end of the day, it was awarded something that very few people will ever get. And I'm sitting here just, still like pinch myself knowing that I've got a big fat trophy headed this way in the next couple of months, that's going to be really exciting when it finally lands. So, I really appreciate you and what the NFL did.
Of course, man. And, we appreciate you being willing to tell your story and all of it. It's hard to do that. And thanks for being so open about everything and so helpful and involved in the process. I don't think it would have been the same if you weren't. So it was a great journey.
Yep. It certainly was. So remember, everybody, if you want to see the movie, go check it out. Mark Pattison, NFL.com. There's a big red button. You can push that and it will scroll you through and you can tee it up and that's where you can see it. So on that note, I totally appreciate you. Totally appreciate this whole project. It's been amazing. And hopefully onward and upward and we'll see where life goes for both of us, as we go forward. So on that note, he is the one, the only Ryan Travis. Thank you so much.